30 seconds, please. Good evening and welcome to the January 14th Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District meeting. So our first order of business, would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next order of business would be the public comment, and for that, just because we do have a couple of people in the chambers, this is the time at which anybody can come before the board, and if you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, we welcome those. Is there anybody in the chamber that would like to speak at the public comment period? Seeing none, we're moving on to the next item, and that is to approve the agenda. And I would then look to my colleagues and see if there are any changes to the agenda. I know we're going to have one slight modification on the treasurer's report, and I'm going to, because our treasurer is absent this evening, I'm going to ask that we combine item 6.1, 6.2, just to allow us, because we have one item that we want to share with the public this evening. So we'll just call it an item 6.1 to have an update on the treasurer's report. Anybody else? Any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you, everybody. So the next item then is the other old new business. And we're going to do our programs and projects update. I'm so frequently wrong on who I'm guessing is handling this. Is it Maggie? No. Jamie.
Here's the graph of Prior Lake over the last month. As you can see, we're reaching that the weir height. Any day now we'll probably be hitting that, and the water will start naturally flowing over the weir again. So because there is still flow coming in from Spring Lake and some other small tributaries, that will probably continue to rise. Our plan is, assuming that the water will stay high over winter as it's predicted to, we'll plan on opening the low flow gate again as soon as we can. The soonest would be March 1st, according to our permit. So that will be the plan as long as everything is safe at that time. We do have a little bit of concern about ice houses. If there's still houses out there and we drop the level, there could form a gap of air, which could create some problems, but we'll work with that when we get there. So the monitoring minute this month is going to be on the 2018 monitoring results. And I'm going to focus on two different parameters and two different ways of analyzing those results. This is a map of the monitoring sites that we had in 2018, and those are actually the sites that we have flow monitoring equipment, which is important for analyzing the data. So we are going to talk about total suspended solids and dissolved phosphorus. Total suspended solids is important because it can carry pollutants, it can smother aquatic habitat, it can reduce sunlight, which reduces plant growth, it can clog fish gills and other things. The other parameter would be dissolved phosphorus, which, as we know, is kind of the main parameter that causes algae growth, which is a big topic in our watershed. So when we're talking about these parameters, there's two ways that I'm going to discuss about how to analyze them, and one is going to talk about the concentrations, and one is loads. And concentrations is just the amount of a pollutant in a certain volume of water. So we'll talk about micrograms per liter or milligrams per liter. And then when we talk about loads, it's taking those concentrations and adding a volume of water to, adding more time to it. So it's going to be like a concentration over a certain amount of time. So we're going to look at milligrams per year at that monitoring site. But because we can't really comprehend milligrams, we're going to talk about pounds per year. And that will be like how many pounds of sediment goes past that monitoring site in a year. Any questions about those two methods or that description?
Mr. Chair, just my favorite lake, Pike Lake, so that number's on page 19. I'm sorry. On page 19, I just, as you know, have an interest in Pike Lake. Why is that number so high? Is that because of agricultural activity around it?
Okay. Well, you're kind of jumping ahead of me here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll talk about the results. I just mean if there's any questions
Okay.
about the methods of analyzing.
I shall wait, pardon me.
Okay. So, yep, Bruce?
A question, you're using the Flux software, and does that take all your monitoring information and they can calculate out a yearly basis? Is that what that does? Or
Yes.
Can you explain how that happens?
Yeah, so you take all of the samples that you had in that given period of time. In this example, we did 1 year, but in the past, we've done up to 3 years at a time. So you combine those concentrations and throughout the whole year, and then with the flow combined with those results, it gives you the total amount of that pollutant. So I can't really describe how the model works itself, but we plug in all the sample results, all of the flow monitoring, for the whole year, and it spits out the amount of pollutant in a given time period.
Did you have an idea how accurate you think this model is?
Yeah, we do have, which I didn't include in this memo, we have statistics on that, like how accurate can we predict that this is. So just for sake of simplicity, we didn't include that in here, but it can be as accurate as 5% and then maybe up to 25-30%, depending on how many samples you took within that given time period.
Okay, that makes sense. More
Yeah.
samples, more accuracy.
Yep, which is a lot of times people will do multiple years so that you can get the accuracy down.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So Jamie, can I do a follow-up on that? Because actually, I was going to ask that question. I thought you were dead on, Bruce. So it looks like we have a couple of problem children on the big phosphorus loads, the dissolved phosphorus coming into Spring Lake. And of those three, do you have a ballpark on the accuracy? Those are highly monitored, so would it be fair to say that our confidence level is about 95%, meaning a plus or minus 5, or something of that? Is that sufficient?
So it also takes into effect, like if you took all of your samples during a low flow condition, then it wouldn't be as accurate as you would have to take samples during low flow, medium flow, high flow, and get an accurate representation of all of those. So I would say the CD1, CD2, and CD3 sites, I'm sorry, just CD2 and CD3, we take samples there every single week, the whole time that it's flowing. And all the other sites, we take every other week. So I would say CD2 and CD3 are slightly more accurate than the rest of them, but depending on when we took all those samples, and I think we did get a very good representation, but I just honestly don't remember what the numbers are for each of that, and it would be different for every single site, pretty much, a little bit.
Would it be difficult to add that in the future, a confidence interval for each
Oh,
of those? I think that'd be valuable just to get a sense for that, but
Yeah, I have that
Great.
data, so I can definitely.
awesome. Thanks, Jamie. Kurt?
We need to take a break. We have a new recording system and we forgot to start it, so I just need 1 minute to start that here.
It's the city's recording machine, but they showed us how to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Rewind.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is a diagram that we've used in the past. That EOR did this flux modeling for us in the past. And this is, we literally just deleted the old values and put in the new values. So I know a lot of people liked seeing this diagram in the past, so this is a representation of that. I don't want to spend a ton of time looking at every single number on this chart. Instead, what I did was I made a map that is color-coded, which I think is a little bit easier to comprehend just by looking at it quickly. So we can get back to this if you want to. This is in the memo that we've included in the board packet. But I wanted to, like I said, we're talking only about 2 parameters here. So this is the total suspended solids concentrations on the left and the loads on the right. So green is the best and red is the worst out of all of our monitoring sites. So to me, I think it's really important to look at both concentrations and loads because, like we said, concentrations are a certain amount in of a pollutant in a volume of water. But so if it's really dirty, it's really polluted. But if that water is really dirty and there's only a tiny amount of water, like a tiny trickle of water coming into Spring Lake, it's really not gonna change Spring Lake that much. It does indicate that there's a problem. You know, it's dirty for a reason and there might be something to address, but overall we might not wanna like spend a ton of effort looking into that, or at least not prioritize on that first. We would wanna get to that eventually. Loading takes into account the concentration and the volume of water over the entire year. So if you look at the map on the right, you kind of see that the reds are the ditch 13 sites. So you can see that pretty much by far ditch 13 contributes the most amount of sediment into Spring Lake. And if you look at the concentrations on the left, it shows that number 31, that's actually the 1217 wetland that we restored a couple of years ago. But we happen to have a lot of carp in there, and we think that they were stirring up the sediment there. So then you kind of just need to keep going back and forth. So if you look at that, the concentrations of that, where it says 31, you look over on the loads and it's green. It doesn't really impact Spring Lake very much because there's really not that much water that comes out of that wetland. So I'm just kind of trying to point out the differences in between them. And so basically, you can see ditch 13 is by far, like it has the most loads and it also has the higher concentration. So what I see when I look at this is like, okay, it is concentrated and it does have high load, so that's somewhere we definitely want to focus on. Did you have a question, Fred?
Clarification. Go ahead, Fred. You got to turn that on.
Yes.
So how can you explain Pike Lake being so high?
So Pike Lake is this site right up here at the top.
Yep.
The very most northern site. You can see on the left the concentrations. It's kind of in the middle. it's not too bad, it's not that great. But on the right, that's the load, so that's considering the volume. And there's a lot of water that comes through the outlet channel. So just because there's so much volume of water and that medium amount of sediment, that's what's putting the high amount of sediment into Pike Lake.
So the channels I kind of thought we were bringing clean water into the lake. You and I have talked about that.
Yeah.
You're saying it's carrying suspended solids?
Yeah, and
And where's it picking those up?
so we did have a lot of erosion in the stream, in the bank outlet channel last year. I don't know if we were doing any work in the channel.
But south of Pike Lake? Yes?
I don't remember.
I thought most of the channel work was north of Pike Lake.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly when it was done, but so this would be like this is the one site that I looked at. Then I kind of was like, this doesn't really seem exactly dead on to me. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you have to take more samples to hit to get a better accuracy. I do think that the outlet channel is generally very clear, and it might be that we took more samples on days that it was dirtier, or we happened to get one or two really high sites. So like when EOR did the analysis in the past, they did 3 years at a time, so it had so many more samples. So I do think that just off of my experience in the outlet channel, I think this one might be a little bit off, which would make me want to analyze this more in the future. But
So,
it's still not, like when you look at the concentration, I just have these rated as best to worst, not necessarily good to bad. It's just kind of in the middle, and the outlet channel generally, or the watershed generally, has pretty clear streams, besides ditch 13, but
so
it's kind of comparing.
does this increase the sedimentation in the lake? So are we getting more sedimentation in the lake itself
More than,
because of these numbers?
I don't know what you're comparing it to, sorry.
I'm not comparing it to anything. I'm
was
just
asking
seeing, because we talk about, and you know far more about this than I do, but we talk about the sedimentation in Spring Lake and Upper Prior Lake. Are we creating a problem here by having these kinds of loads on Pike Lake that eventually we'll have to go back and deal with? Are we building a problem?
I'm not too concerned about it, just because, it has a higher load, but I do think it's mostly due to the high volume of water, not because the water being that dirty.
Oh, okay. Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Bruce?
Yeah, Jamie, this is 2018 data that you're working with, right? That's what it says?
Right.
So, 2019 was our record year. So would we expect that 2019, there would be, these numbers, the sediment loading would be higher because of the amount of additional rainfall?
I would definitely think they'd be higher this year, yeah.
So what was do you know what the rainfall was in what was our
2018?
precipitation in 2018, you remember? I thought I saw something like 34.
Sent that graph, I just, a little bit less.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, I really like this information from a standpoint, if it's reliable information and we can use it to generate or look at where projects need to be formulated, where we can really make some difference. So, and if I'm looking at this like ditch 13 and so much sediment's coming just south of 282, and then some of it's either dropping off or flowing into the lake. But if you had that loading every year, that's a significant loading.
Right.
So it's just something that's really nice about this data. It's telling us where the issues are. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Diane happened to have the graph. We had about 34 inches of rain in 2018 versus about 41 inches in 2019. So this is just the other map that I had put together for the dissolved phosphorus, which, as we said, contributes more to algae growth. Looking at the concentration side, there's the one site that pops out is definitely the highest on the left at 392 micrograms per liter. That's the Spring West subwatershed, we call it, the stream that flows by the highway department. So that one has consistently been high in concentrations over all the years of monitoring. And you can see it's quite a bit higher than ditch 13 even. The other high site down at the bottom near Fish Lake, that's mostly water that's coming from a tile line that was an open tile inlet. So it's a very, very small amount of water, but it has high concentrations. If you look over at the right where the loads are, you can see it's green, like that site down by Fish Lake doesn't really impact it a whole lot. So again, we've got high concentrations or loads also in the ditch 13, but you can also see how much the ferric chloride treatment plant reduces it. So this is before treatment. You've got 1,882 pounds per year of phosphorus, dropping it down to 705 pounds per year before it goes into Spring Lake. So all in all, when you look at the contributions to Spring Lake, that Spring West subwatershed site is contributing the most amount of dissolved phosphorus and has the highest concentrations. And so as what I was going to say is what to do with this data is, we've been doing this in the past, but it just kind of helps focus our priorities. And we've known, this data hasn't changed a whole lot over the years, but what we've done with that is that Spring West subwatershed, we are currently doing a feasibility study to figure out how to reduce the phosphorus coming into Spring Lake. So that should be done relatively soon, and then hopefully we can get a grant, or it's easier to get a grant when you have that feasibility study, which could help fund it if, to help with our budget. We're also working with the farmer. The Soil and Water is mostly working with the farmer just upstream of there on some feedlot modifications. So they're doing a major overhaul at that operation, which should also greatly reduce the concentrations and loads to Spring Lake. And of course, we've been working on ditch 13 over the years. That's kind of always our focus area too. So this reiterates that we should continue focusing in this watershed, and it shows us how effective the ferric chloride treatment plant is. So it's definitely worth the money that we're investing in that. I think that's kind of everything I wanted to say. So there's so many different ways you can look at these maps. I can talk about them for another hour if you want, comparing the concentrations to the loads and all that, but
Maybe not that long, but I do have two questions.
Okay.
So Jamie, I'm going to clarify, when would we have 2019 data?
We just got the data, and we're putting into our database right now. So now that we're more familiar with the software, this is the first time we've done it in-house. We're able to spit this data out a lot faster. I would say 2 or 3 months maybe, if we wanted to prioritize on getting this exact report out. We do plan on combining. We're going to combine 2017 to 2019 just so we can decrease the error bars, I guess.
Okay. I think it'll be useful. I think from the questions you're seeing up here, this is very valuable, and I'm going to pull you back to figure 2, the one that you said I think EOR pulled together. To me, and I'm going to have you correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was looking at all of the other graphs or charts that you had here for us and the different ways to skin it, this one sort of seemed to pull it all together. To look at the dissolved phosphorus, which then is the problem child that we are attempting to address. And so for me, from a policy perspective, when I look at this, I can see it looks like the key monitoring sites on the amount of load going into Spring Lake, which of course feeds upper and then lower. But you look at it, it's CD3 from a monitoring site, and 19 are our biggest problems with, you know, a combined 1,500 pounds of phosphorus per year, and we need to choke that off, especially because as we're doing alum treatments and continuing to do alum treatments there, but it also looks like 14 is also then maybe like on a third tier. But then I get thinking about what's happening in the upper watershed. Of course, anything that gets downstream is going to maybe reduce that load, and correct me if I'm wrong, but of course our Sutton Lake project, which is not just about storage, but as we frequently talk about our upper watershed plan to hold back some of that water and slow its progress through the upper watershed as it gets down, will create some additional natural filtering. So is it fair to assume that once Sutton Lake project gets done, and if we're implementing it to its fullest, that coming out of CD1, we should see some sort of a drop on a typical normal year if we ever had that data? And I know Mother Nature doesn't necessarily cooperate with us that way, but is it fair to say that as the water is less polluted water moving down, we should see further reductions coming out of CD3 monitoring station?
Yeah, can I have Carl
Carl?
jump in here?
Is that a fair assessment, or what am I missing?
Mr. Chair, yes, to an extent, but if you look at any of the other figures, while they don't have sub-watersheds boundaries on it, the Sutton Lake tributary area compared to the entire tributary area to CD1 is maybe 20% at most.
Oh, gotcha. Yep.
So the benefit is going to be masked by the remaining 80% of that.
It's not the big problem moving into there. It's the ditch, is back going to the ditch.
Correct.
Got it. But it will have some benefit.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I look at number 14, and is that the exact location where you're doing the sampling?
Yeah, are you looking at the diagram on the screen
Yeah,
here?
I'm looking at 14, which would be,
Yeah, so that's,
looking at the map here, the monitoring sites.
yep, the map is the exact location. So
Okay.
yeah, it's the outlet of Buck Lake.
My question is this: when we went on the tour and we looked at the water, this water that goes through, we went down to where it came into Spring Lake, and it was very, very clear. Did you ever do any testing of that water to see what the phosphorus level was?
Yep, that is essentially Site 14. So this is a perfect example of concentrations versus loads. Like, there's quite a bit of water coming through the Buck Lake channel, which is that Site 14. So it's very clear, but because there's a high volume of water, it is contributing what looks like to be, when you're looking at the loads, it's like, oh yeah, that we want to tackle that one next. But when you look at the water and you see how clear it is, like, the amount of effort that would have to be put into getting it even cleaner, you know, like, would be, I think, very, very, very high amount of effort, whatever I want to say. So when you look at just, like, you're thinking more like the sediment is the clarity. So if you look between CD3 and 14, CD3 is 10 times higher than 14.
Yeah, I guess my point is, if you're sampling 14 is south of 282, correct? Or is that
Yeah.
not
it's-
correct?
Yep.
And then, my point is, then that water goes all through that big wetland complex. And it really cleans up. I don't know what the phosphorus loading is. It might be a small amount, but what the concentration is there, does that filter through to that wetland? Does phosphorus get filtered out in that area?
So yeah, the sediment would definitely get
Sediment
filtered out
gets-
even more. But the phosphorus, we have taken a couple samples at that exact location that we visited on the tour. It was relatively inconclusive. We think it might work both as a source and a sink, but also there was some backwater from the lake because it kind of just didn't flow very fast right there. So we don't know if we can trust those results very well.
Well, my point in making these questioning is, if we have the wetlands and they restored under the 13 ditch and the other areas, will have a reduction of sediment. Should be, of course, some reduction in phosphorus. I mean, you can see the difference. When we're on the tour, you could really see the difference of the quality of the water. What's the difference? Well, the Buck Lake stream, or that goes in there, it's going through all these wetlands and restored areas, where the other one is not.
Right.
So I think that's a good point. This data shows that water quality difference. And
Right.
that's what I was getting at, where you took those, if you took a sample at 14 just south of 282 and then took it
Yeah.
right at the lake, do we see further improvement of that water quality?
Not really, no.
We don't.
Not in the few samples that we took.
Okay.
Kurt?
I have a question. Why on figure 2 on page 12 does it jump so, the phosphorus, the TSS jumps so dramatically from CD1 to CD2 and then drops somewhat to CD3? Am I to assume that it's picking up a lot of bad stuff along the way from culverts or streams or whatever? What does that mean?
So the sediment between CD1, CD2, and CD3. The main difference between CD1 and CD2 is that somehow it almost doubles in volume. The water volume almost doubles between the two sites. So that would be the main difference, because you can
but
see.
why does the water volume double? Is there a lot of culverts there? Is there a lot of streams coming in? I mean, there's got to be a reason.
I mean, that streams naturally do pick up volume as they go downstream. I haven't walked that channel very well to know if there's a lot of little tributaries or if there's any groundwater flow or seeps coming into that area, but I can tell you that the reason for the difference in concentration, we feel pretty confident that the carp are the main reason for the increased concentration between CD1 and CD2, because just upstream of CD2 we found hundreds, thousands of carp in that wetland there. So they're stirring up the sediment in that wetland, and we've seen in the past 5 to 10 years a divergence. Like before, CD1 and CD2 used to track with each other, and now just in the past 5 years they've started diverging from each other, which we believe, and in the 10 years I've been monitoring, I hadn't started seeing carp until the past 3-4 years.
That's what I was going to say. There might be a few carp in there, but there can't be a large number of carp in ditch 13, is there?
They did do a population estimate, and what was it, 1,000 something per hectare? High. So yeah, there were really a lot of carp. You can see them everywhere. When you're standing on that little platform, you can see them splashing around. So for the amount of water that's there, they're so concentrated and it's so shallow that every little move they make is mixing the sediment up.
Does ditch 13 totally freeze out in the winter?
I think it can. I don't think it does every single year, depending on how much flow is going on.
Well, I don't know. The water volume gets really shallow during the winter, and I would think that everything would freeze out, including the carp, wouldn't it?
It definitely freezes from the top. There might be some flow underneath, but from the top, it's definitely freezes every year. But so if there's some deeper pockets, if they're finding, they could be hiding in there, or they just come upstream in the spring when it floods and pop over that weir, which is on the plan to be fixed next year so that they can't do that.
So I think this is going to be, it's very useful information.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this, pulling this together and tolerating all our questions. Jamie, you can see the interest level from the board. As we have been prioritizing projects all around this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
it's clearly a driver for us. And I think even more so when we're going to do the new upper watershed plan that we're looking to kick off here in the end of the first quarter, early second quarter, is to get at some of that stuff to go make sure that we have the right plans in place to deal with this. So, thank you.
Okay, and then I do have one more slide myself. I did just finish the annual ferric chloride treatment facility report. And here's a graph of, at the top of CD2, so before treatment, and after treatment, CD3, the blue line. And so you can see it definitely reduces the phosphorus all year long, so it's doing a great job. The table at the bottom, however, it does show that the percent reduction this year is the lowest that we've had since, basically since we've started tracking this. So the percent SRP reduction, that's the dissolved phosphorus that we were just talking about, that's the main number that we're looking at, so that has dropped down to 43%. My theory, I think, if you remember, we had changed the programming so that depending on the stream level, it would dose a certain amount of ferric. The higher the stream, the more ferric it would dose. And so I think what maybe the problem is that we have the lower end too low. So I want to this year, like, instead of the dose going down to close to zero, maybe just stop it at a half a gallon per hour rather than going all the way down to zero, because when I had done that analysis in the, it was in August when I gave that report, the results were still really good at that time. We were getting 60% reductions, but then something happened after that where it dropped down quite a bit. So I think it was, I think we just need to calibrate that program a little bit more, and we should be seeing better reductions. But overall, also there are the total pounds of phosphorus removed, like we just were looking at the in those maps, and we did remove 600, almost 600 pounds of dissolved phosphorus, which is amazing. Like, that's an astronomical amount. So it's doing great. It just, we know it can do better, so we're going to play with that program this year.
All right, just a quick update on the IPM, the CARP strategies. So we're kind of in a standstill until all the conditions are right to get the carp out of the lakes. But if you want to go to the next slide. So we've been working on other things in the meantime to get things situated so that it's, we're nice and ready to go for when the carp are there. So we ordered a seine net and a box trap for the spring, and then WSB and I were talking, and we talked about having these block traps. So they're just like smaller seine nets to block carp from going into certain directions, which is just another strategy that we can use. And we saved quite a bit of money on the seine net, so we had enough to get an extra tool in the toolbox for us to help get these carp out of these lakes. And we've been also talking to Don Geyer, who's our commercial fisherman in the area. He's fishing another lake this week, but we're hoping to get him on board pretty soon. We also are the first, I believe, like from what Tony has talked to with Daryl Peterson, our DNR fisheries guy, I believe, or Daryl Ellis, I believe we're the first in the state to do the special permit, which is using another fisherman besides our commercial fishermen. So I think we're the first to do it. So yes. So we've got Jeff Riedemann lined up on the side just in case Don Geyer isn't willing or able to do the seine for us. So we're lining up that. We're also talking to Jeff about what to do if the ice doesn't get thick enough and the carp are grouped up. So as you know, like, if the ice has to be pretty thick to handle those trucks with all those pounds of carp. So we're talking to him about using ATVs instead and other strategies that we can use. We would have to obviously pay him a little bit more or pay him some funding for the extra effort that he'd have to put into that. But that's just another strategy that we're thinking about right now. We just really want to get these carp out of the water. And then if you go to the next slide. So right now, in general, we've been out there just about once a week checking on these carp, and then WSB will be out later on this week just because Don Geyer and Jeff Riedemann are both ready to take out a haul. So right now the carp are roughly hanging around in those green areas, and the red areas are where we want them. We believe that Spring Lake is probably going to get lined up first, just because the carp are right there. We got 5 out of 9 tags where we want them, relatively speaking. And on Upper Pryor, they're just not going where we want. So we're going to start probably making some noise here in the next few weeks, because we've got 2 speaker sets that we're going to use just to try to spook them, try to get them to go where we want. And we're just keep talking to these commercial fishermen about other strategies that they can think of too to get the carp where we want them to go. And we're just kind of in the waiting game right now. And that's kind of the update. We're just lining everything up. We keep thinking about it and thinking about other strategies that we can use.
Can't believe I turned my mic on for this, but actually I was just going to say, great to see this. Congrats, but you've now piqued my interest with four-wheelers. What would it take? Because if spring is ripe right now, can we go do four-wheelers next week?
Mr. Chair, managers, we could. It would just, well, you've seen how many carp that we haul out on these trucks. It would take a lot of trips back and forth, but it is something that we're talking to the fishermen about. They've done it on smaller hauls on different lakes, and this would be quite a bit more if we had the seine that we think we're going to. And so it's just a matter of logistics and what dollar point is going to convince them that this is going to be worth the effort.
So that would be the interesting thing, because usually what I remember seeing is when they do the seine, that net stays there for some period of time, and that you could, over time, even if you have a big seine, you're very successful at getting the tens of thousands that we all hope for, you could still be running four-wheelers for days, correct? I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Mr. Chair, managers, yeah, if you could get 4 of those buckets in there, I mean, you can put, 30 of those in the back of a truck, so it would be quite a bit more effort. And it's from the opportune thing that Tony had mentioned from WSB is that instead of going all the way back to the boat landing, which you normally have to do with trucks, we would likely be able to use the knotty oar. So it may not be quite the amount of effort. We're still working on that, though, and what that might look like.
Okay, go get them. Kurt?
So, in other words, on Spring Lake, they're not in the red zone yet, but you expect them to school there shortly?
Mr. Chair, Manager Hennis, yeah, we do. So Mary was thinking, because Jeff has been out trying to track these guys, but he's mainly been doing it from the road. And so she's going to come in, because her suspicion is that even though they look like they're widely spread, they might actually be just in a deep hole, and so we're just getting not the right signals. So she's going to go out there on the lake later this week and just make sure that they're not grouped up, and if they are, then she's going to start engaging those fishermen.
Another question I had that we ran into at the last, back in, when we did the last seining on Spring Lake, is do we know that area is now clear of any debris? Any branches or logs or anything? Are we sure of that, so we don't run into this like Geyer did?
Mr. Chair, Manager Hennis, yeah, so when Geyer ran into that branch last time, they pulled that out, so that should be gone, hopefully. And he's willing and ready to do a seine in that location now that he knows that it's clear.
That's what we want to make 20% of the carp, like Geyer claimed that we did, because that damn log was in there. All right, thank you.
Bruce?
Just one question. If everything, the ice or whatever, gets thick enough where you got them schooled, how quickly can you move? Because I know last year it was always like, well, everything had to line up, and now we have the net. We have some fishermen lined up. So how quickly, if they're in that red zone, how quickly can you move?
Mr. Chair and managers, so there's so many variables to play with, because there's also other people asking them, the commercial fishermen, to do seines. So there's that. The market question has actually been wiped away, because if you remember, there was those 5 things we had to have lined up. So commercial fishermen ready, nobody else knocking on their door. The second one was a good marketplace, but WSB, I don't know if the managers are aware, but WSB started their own fish purchasing place, so they're able to purchase smaller hulls. So that's that barrier is kind of gone. And then the next one is just the fish grouped up, which we're waiting on, thick enough ice, and then I forget the last one, but anyway. But there's other factors at play, but I believe just because we've been building up this relationship with those fishermen, they're ready to go. They know that we're willing to like pay the additional dollar to get them to use other methods like ATVs. I feel like we're in a good place, and I feel like if the fish were grouped up this week, they could haul it out next week. But again, those conditions have to be right, and I can never promise anything. I wish I could, but we'll move as quickly as we can.
Yeah, I didn't ask her who the Super Bowl winner is. I just want to know how soon you can get the carp out. Well, anyway, can we move quicker? I mean, last year was frustrating because we didn't. The fisherman wasn't there. Things were lined up and all. I mean, it was like one thing after another. So we really didn't get. The question I'm really trying to get at is, we're trying to do whatever we can so that we can move quickly when the time is ripe. And is it 2 days? Is it another week? We still have to wait, or it depends on the fishermen? I mean, it just sounds like there's still way too many variables.
Mr. Chair Managers, yeah, you're right. Last year was a weird year. I think there was all of 2 seines in all of Minnesota last year. I forgot the 5th one, which was the ice or the air temperatures. So that was a big factor last year. And the really thick snow, you couldn't get in there. So this year we don't have the real thick snow. We don't have those super cold temperatures quite yet. So the conditions that way should be pretty good. And yeah, I wish there weren't so many variables on this, but we're working around them. We're trying to find every possibility that we can to make this thing work.
I think it's pretty obvious we support go do the four-wheelers. Go do the seine on spring. If they're there, go seine, and then figure out how to pull them out. So I like that idea. Go. And I think the rest of the board does. I think it's pretty obvious. We've been, you know this. Go get them. Thanks, Maggie. Oh, Kurt, you had one more question?
Just one quick question. I've had a lot from the townships, especially a lot of inquiries about when are we going to do the seining. We want to know when it's going to be. We want to come out and see it. So please give run into time issues. Okay, thank you.
Any other project stuff, or are we on to HAB? Okay. There you go, John, I think you're up. Diane, any intro before John chats with us? John, come on up. You know how this works here, right? Come on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and go to the podium over here.
Press the button.
And you'll see, yep, the microphone. And if you press on that and sort of hold your finger across it, it'll go from green to red, and we'll see. I think that mic should turn red too, right?
Red to green, yeah.
Or, sorry, green. Yeah,
Bottom
red to green.
top. Bottom to
Okay, is it green? Can you hear me? Okay. I think I know everyone here, or you probably know me or know of me. So I'm John Holtz. I'm a limnologist and owner of HAB Aquatic Solutions. Our company did the first 2 alum applications at Spring Lake. And I'm not exactly sure why I'm here completely, but I know I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the results from the Spring Lake application, and then I think I'm here also to field some questions about a potential application at Upper Pryor. So that's why I have such a general title slide. The problem, I don't think I need to tell this group, we're here to talk about phosphorus management. We understand that that's driving most poor water quality problems in lakes. Lake management oftentimes comes down to phosphorus management. Okay, we've had good examples already of the 2 sources of phosphorus to lakes. Jamie's been talking a lot about the external sources, how the phosphorus is getting into Spring Lake, and eventually Upper Pryor Lake as well. So all the work that you're doing in the watershed to keep it out is one vector for phosphorus getting into the lake and degrading water quality. The other one is recycling of the phosphorus from the lake bed. So once that phosphorus gets into the lake, or if it's naturally occurring in the lake bed, under certain conditions, it recycles or leaches out of the sediments, providing a second source of phosphorus to the water column. So the reason this is a concern, you can do a great job managing the watershed, but still have phosphorus entering the water column for the algae to use. That's what we're trying to address with the alum. We're trying to inactivate or bind up that phosphorus in the sediments so it can't leach up into the water column. And so we're trying to reduce or eliminate that source of phosphorus. I think I covered this holistic approach. We need to address both the watershed and the sediment sources. We're using alum to do that. It forms a flock. We add it as a liquid, it forms a flock. That flock settles down into the sediments, and it has active binding sites in the flock that will bind up the phosphorus that's in the sediments and also bind up phosphorus as it tries to leach out or release in the future. So at Spring Lake, the total initial dose, oh, I got this right here, sorry. The total initial dose was 584,000 gallons as calculated by Barr, I believe. Then that was recommended that be applied in 3 doses. The first dose, or the first application was in 2013, and that was half of the total dose. The second application was in 2018, and that was a quarter of the total dose. So of the remaining, there's a quarter remaining that has not been applied yet. Okay. I got this graph from Jamie. Thank you, showing the water quality at Spring Lake over the course of the 2 alum applications. So the orange bar there is total phosphorus, and you can see before it looks like you're averaging somewhere between 80 and 100 micrograms per liter in the water column. After that first alum application, it was reduced down to below 60, below the state threshold. It was starting to creep up. 16, it looked like it was right around 60. In 2017, it was slightly above, and at that time, it kind of triggered the mechanism into doing the second alum dose. And that one was done in the spring, June of 2018. And you can see we knocked the phosphorus back down to something similar to what happened after the first application. Okay? Next slide. So this is a little busy. Again, thank you to Jamie. She helped me provide the data to put this graph together. And what I did is I went back and you guys have a great data set, by the way. You should be applauded for your monitoring efforts, and I encourage you to keep that up. You never know when data like this is going to be useful. Sometimes it's not evident when you're paying the money to do the monitoring. But having data sets like this is invaluable. So a lot of times what can be done before, in between, and after alum applications, you can actually go in and collect the sediment and measure how much phosphorus is leaching off. That's a direct measurement of internal loading. That isn't done very often. It's kind of a special, almost like a research project when that is done. But kind of the second best thing is what you have here, and that is looking at how much phosphorus is accumulating in the bottom waters of the lake. Okay, so during the summertime, a lake thermally stratifies. Everyone familiar with that? You have the warm water at the top, cold water at the bottom, and there's limited mixing because of the density gradient. So we have that water at the bottom that pretty much stays down there essentially unmixed. So we can measure how much phosphorus increases in that bottom water over the summertime as an estimate of internal loading. It's not perfect because the volume of that hypolimnion, that bottom water, may change, may vary year to year. So it's not perfect, but it's the best indicator that we have. So what I've done here is your data set, basically samples were collected about twice a month, around the first of every month and around the middle of every month during the summer. And I think the data set goes back to like 2014. I couldn't fit it all on one graph, so I just went back to 2010. So the red lines on here are showing the phosphorus concentration at the bottom of Spring Lake before the alum application. And first note that it's low in May, increases to a high in August, September, and then when the lake turns over and completely mixes, it goes down again in the fall. So that increase through the year at the bottom waters is due to internal loading. So before we did the alum application, the red lines are showing lots of accumulation of phosphorus at the bottom of the lake, strong indication of internal loading. After the application, after the first application, and that would be the yellow lines, you can see it's greatly reduced. So the alum is down there working, is keeping the phosphorus from coming out of the sediments. But you'll notice that as we go from year 14, 15, 16, 17, the yellow lines start to increase a little bit toward the end of each summer. So that's an indication that some of the phosphorus that's leaching out of sediment is bypassing the alum. There's perhaps not enough active binding sites left to intercept the phosphorus to the same degree that it was immediately after application in 2014. So that was good. So the second alum application occurred, and the green lines are the 2 years after the second alum application. Remember, the second alum application was only a quarter dose. The first one was a half dose. So again, great results, especially in 2018. Knocked that phosphorus load way down at the bottom of the lake. Now, this is what we see in other lakes that have successful alum applications. So the first thing to note here is that the alum is working. However, there is an apparent increase between 2018 and 2019. I don't want to put too much emphasis on that because it's only 1 year. We haven't accounted for maybe differences in the thermocline and stratification patterns, but it's an indication that perhaps the second dose was not as effective as the first dose. I don't know that. We don't know that for sure, but it's a possibility. Okay, so is everyone clear with this slide? It's kind of busy. There's a lot going on here. Everyone understand it? Okay, you can go ahead to the next one. So the beauty and the advantage of these split dose applications, in your case, three applications to get to the total dose, is that you can adjust things mid-project. We see that on other lakes that we work on. It's been highly successful. You can adjust the dose. So what I'm suggesting is that you go back in and take some sediment cores, reevaluate the sediments of Spring Lake, reevaluate the dose need instead of just assuming that the last quarter dose is sufficient. It allows for not only mid-project adjustment in the dose, but also in the location. When we did Bald Eagle Lake, after the first application, they had us apply the second dose. The second dose was the same volume, but they had us apply it to different areas in the lake. So you can not only adjust the dose, but you can adjust where it needs to be applied. And I think that makes sense from my review of the Spring Lake data. Someone could go out and collect the sediment cores essentially now through the ice, have them evaluated. It may confirm that the remaining quarter dose is fine, but to me that seems like a good investment given how expensive these alum applications are. So that's really all that I had on Spring Lake, and I'd be happy to answer questions about Spring Lake, or I also understand there may be some questions about the logistics or whatever of a possible application at Upper Prairie.
I think we have lots of questions, so thanks, John.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead, Fred.
I'm going to do some of the quick ones, I guess. So the sediment cores, do you have some input as to where they're taken, or how do we decide where they're taken?
Our company does sediment coring. We know how to do the sediment coring, but we don't do it in Minneapolis market, and mainly because you have really good consulting firms here that are skilled at doing that.
I guess I was just wondering where they're taken. Are they taken the same places they were taken before?
I don't know where they were taken before.
Do anybody know the answer to that?
I would be happy to consult with whoever I need to on that.
I mean, is there a strategy to where we're taking these, given the applications that have already been made?
So there was a strategy because they had us apply, I think it was everything greater than 20 feet, got a stronger dose in Spring Lake, and everything between 5 and 15 or 5 and 20 got a lighter dose. So at one time, I'm assuming that sediment cores were taken at various locations in Spring Lake, and doses were calculated based on lake depth. Yeah, because we had 2 different dose zones within Spring Lake. But as far as the exact locations, I don't know.
So those original ones were done by Barr, I believe, and are they re-looking at where they're taking these, or?
I honestly haven't talked about the exact locations of how they choose where the cores are, so I don't know about that, but I would assume it would be in, a relatively similar fashion, spread throughout the lake in different areas so that they can calculate the dose, but I haven't had that exact conversation, but Barr is, I have talked to Barr about doing sediment cores, and they are willing and able to do it this winter or in the spring. When I did talk to Barr, they had recommended, or they had suggested that springtime was actually maybe a better time where you get more accurate results because the lake was mixed at that time rather than in the winter when the lake is stratified. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. He said that they can do some calculations to kind of make up for that for the winter time cores. So I don't know if you have a strong feeling one way or the other.
It's pretty common to collect cores through the ice. I'm not sure what the difference would be, to be honest with you. If there were significant differences in the results based on collecting them in the winter versus the spring, well, then we should collect them in the spring. I don't think that there probably would be, and I think from a planning perspective, it'd be much more valuable to have the data in the winter time than waiting till the spring.
If I understood it right, I think when the lake is stratified and it's anoxic at the bottom, that the phosphorus is released. So when you take the sediment core, he was saying that because the phosphorus is released into the water, that there's actually less in the sediment core. So we could risk underdosing if they didn't do these calculations to figure out what was actually in the sediment core. But then my thoughts exactly, like if we do it in the spring, a week or two after the ice melts, it's a really rushed situation and we can't really plan and we won't know how much we'll need until last minute. But that would be my next question, is if we did do a core 2 weeks after ice out, do you feel like that would give you guys enough time to actually do a treatment in the spring?
Well, if we were the successful contractor on that bid, we could do it that quickly, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at our district engineer who has a puzzled look on his face. No?
No.
I was thinking that maybe you had something to add to the conversation about when to dose and where, given upper prior? No?
With respect to when and where to core sample, you mean? That I would be consistent with where you took the samples before in the same spatial distribution. But other than that, no, I was off somewhere else.
Certainly sounds like if we're going to be driving a decision on a strategy for now second or a third alum treatment on spring, that it would certainly behoove us to dig in with the consultants who might do this. And I mean, just hearing Jamie talk versus what we were hearing from John, I mean, we want to do this appropriately and right, and so we need to figure out when the right time is before we even do this the cores, and then also, from a timing, but then even the quantity and the location is going to be critical. So it sounds like we need more information on our side, it sounds like.
And Mr.
Is that
Chair,
a fair assessment, or?
I think absolutely, and at the workshop, manager suggested even checking in with the St. Croix Research Station, since their role has expanded in that area. and that we ought to get bids anyways from different providers of services, so we're getting the best deal, but also to get their opinion on what the best timing is.
Yeah,
I did
perfect.
contact,
I think another regional resource you have is Bill James at University of Wisconsin Stout has done a lot of sediment core work in the Twin Cities area and might have some input on that too. You know, everything's a trade-off, so, you know, what's the consequence of taking it in the spring versus the summer? Is that a 3% error or a 30% error? And how valuable is it? You know, when I was thinking from a planning point of view, from a budgeting point of view, not knowing what Spring Lake might cost you until April or May might be a disadvantage to the board. That's where I was coming from.
So there's a couple of factors. One is budget and dollars, but
Yes.
the other is ensuring that we're making good decisions and spending the money wisely. So it is a delicate balancing act, which I'm just, even from what I'm hearing, we need more information on this, but
But from our company's point of view, like I said, if we were the selected contractor, even if we didn't know a dose until April or May, we could still get geared up for a spring application.
thank you. I'm going to see if my colleagues have questions, because I've got a few down here, John, but seeing none, then I'm going to, John, you made a comment about, oh, Kurt, go for it. I thought you should.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions, John. Number one, I was there when you did the first one in October of 13, and it lasted for about 5 years. Now we did another one in what was the fall of
2018?
18, right?
June of 18, yes.
Or June of 18, and it wasn't nearly as successful. Now, why would that be?
It was only half of the amount that we added the first time. So the idea with the split dose application is, I would think what the goal would be is to really see a lot of the benefit from the first half of the application, and the other two are meant to add to the longevity of the application. And in this case, the second application, it initially drove the phosphorus down to the same level that the first application did. You know, it was only 2 years of data, so it's hard to say for sure. We don't have a trend yet, but it looked like in 2019 it bounced up a little higher than we would have anticipated. So that's what's making me say, hey, let's invest the money to reevaluate the dose.
and John, if I can just add, one of the things too is we didn't do a sediment core before the second application. We just kind of went with the original dose. So I think, you know, we were hoping that it was accurate, but if we would have taken a sediment core, we would have probably changed the dose.
Yep.
And the cost of a sediment core is about $15,000. How much is it?
It's 15,000.
That's 15,000 very well spent when you consider what we're spending on an elm treatment. You know, when we did that second treatment, I remember we had a little money left over, so the administrator gave you the okay to add a little more to a deeper part of the lake, which is why I was surprised, you know, in a year and a half, it's already, you know, started to go south.
Yeah. Again, I got to be careful with my comments, because I certainly wasn't the one who did the study and the designing, and I'm not calling that into the question at all, because I haven't seen the original data set. But I can't, you know, we've done over 110 lake applications now, and just kind of my feel for it is the dose in a deeper area seems to be consistent with what we typically see in this area of the world. But the lighter dose in the shallower areas seems a little light to me. So that I would encourage, regardless of where the original cores were taken, make sure that there's representative cores taken in that 5 to 15 foot area. That dose seems a little light compared to what we see in some other regional lakes.
Didn't we do dosing in the shallow areas the
Yes.
first time?
Yes,
Yeah, but not the second time.
we did both times.
We did both times.
Yep. But not nearly as much, no. I would have to get it off my computer, but I don't know if you can go to springlakealum.com, our website. I think it has a map of the application zone on there. I don't know if you have capability to do that.
While
In
she's
the
maybe
meantime,
my,
yeah, other questions?
yeah, I do. Were you done?
Give me one more. I remember exactly when we did the first treatment, we were, pondering whether to do it or not. You gave us a price of $1.67 a gallon. That was the whole thing. That was your cost, the cost of the chemical and everything. And I remember asking you,
Yeah.
do you foresee this price being stable? And you said yes. It hasn't moved for a while. Now the administrator tells us it took a big jump. How much of a jump and why?
At that time, when I said that, it was true. The first, I'm sorry, Jamie, the map I was looking for actually isn't on there. So it was the one with the different colored dose zones. That one was from the first application. So we started doing applications in 2011. And the first 5 or 6 years that we did applications, alum did not go up one single penny. It never went down, it never went up. It was the exact same cost. Since then, there have been significant increases. Who knows? My information is from alum salespeople, so take it with a grain of salt. But I do know that we get, so alum is made from aluminum and sulfuric acid. The United States gets a majority of its aluminum from Russia and majority of its sulfuric acid from China. And we've had better trade relationships with those countries in the past. And in the past, there's also been a lack of tariffs.
So your opinion is the price may be artificially jacked up because of any possible political?
I don't know for sure. Maybe it's just a market adjustment. There was
Yeah.
no increase for 6 years. So maybe it's a market adjustment, maybe it's political.
One very quick question, President, then that'll be it, is Bar Engineering stated to us in their initial study that we could expect roughly a 20-year life after all applications were done. Is that still valid? Thank you.
Again, I'd be speaking out of turn without knowing what went into that estimate, but that is a common estimate that we see on other projects, yes.
So I'm
See,
gonna,
So the reason that I'm not trying to not answer you, but we're controlling the phosphorus that comes from the bottom of the lake, not the phosphorus that comes in from the watershed. So all efforts to keep the watershed load low will extend the longevity of the inactivation.
Just to follow up to that, so when the first application, we expected just 3 years before we did the second one.
Yeah.
And I think you've told us that your experience since those 5 or 6 years ago was that we were getting longer life out of those first. Is that true?
Yeah, the performance of the first Spring Lake alum application was pretty good, especially considering the essentially what was a flood right after we did the application.
so John, I'm going to do a little clarification, first of all.
Sure.
So you mentioned with where the materials are coming from Russia and China. Are there tariffs on the aluminum and the sulfuric acid on each one of those?
I don't know specifically, no. I mean, I have been told that, but I haven't researched it myself.
Okay. Do you know what is the current sort of going price per gallon? Even ballpark. I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it. I was just trying to get a sense, John, for where things are at versus the 167 that.
Oh, to apply it?
Yeah, for all cost in for application for purchase.
Well, in
and
2018, we applied what?
You said 246,000.
146,000 gallons in 2018, and
Yep.
I think our invoice was $269,000. So whatever that turns out to be, dollar per gallon.
And that's about where you expect us to be going forward if we.
We provided some cost estimates on a potential application at Upper Pryor, I think for a grant proposal use. And,
Do we get a discount for being a repeat customer?
So the upper prior dose that we gave some cost guidance on was 231,000 gallons. And we provided a cost estimate of $582,000. Now, keep in mind, that's budgetary grant proposal cost guidance. That's not our bid.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, hey, we got to be a little careful. I need to be a little careful not to get out of order. I mean, we still have to go through an open
Yep.
bidding process.
Yep, no, I appreciate it. I just wanted to get a sense for that, just
Okay.
internally. I mean, you're 269 on 146, you're probably at about 170 a gallon is roughly what that is, I think, ballparking. But, so can you help me out, John? Are there advantages to you? So if we're considering both Spring Lake and Upper Pryor, are there advantages from a contractor perspective to do two at the same time?
Yes.
What kind of advantages might you expect to see? Clearly equipment,
Yeah.
material costs.
Less mobilization costs.
Yep.
We do rent some equipment, and we probably get a better rate on some of our rental stuff for a longer-term rental. Just don't have to move our stuff as far.
Right. And also material costs, if there's more, can you get?
There could be, that's pretty constant. But a volume like that gets the supplier's attention, yes.
Okay, I would assume so, thank you. So I actually then wanted to ask, the other thing is, typically I'd always heard sort of a 10 to 15 year lifetime, but if it's 20, fine, or if it's extending out to 20, that's great. Are you seeing or hearing if in the nature of your business is to treat in-lake phosphorus, whether it's alum or anything else? Is there anything else that you're aware of on the horizon that people are looking at to deal with in-lake that might be either more cost-effective or longer term?
Yep. Nothing more cost-effective for sure. Every economic analysis that I'm aware of where they've looked at the cost to bind up a pound of phosphorus, alum always comes out to be the most cost-effective. It's about $60 to $70 to bind a pound of phosphorus with alum.
But it's a temporary bond, correct?
Yes. Well, it's a permanent bond, but we typically only add enough alum for it to last that 20-year period. Eventually, the alum will get buried by new sediment. You'll have internal loading happening above the flock line.
Yep.
But once it's bound up, it's permanently bound and not available for the algae anymore.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay, I had that one down. So then maybe I might argue, so rough fish later on in life. No, you can't be hearing that from me, right? To stir that flock back up. So sorry, I won't even go there, but okay. I think that was it with the comments they've had. I had nothing further. Anybody else? Kurt, one more?
I have one more. So what is your recommendation in a lake that still has a large carp population? Could one do treatment in the deeper part of the lake where there's less carp present?
Yeah.
Please, we need your expertise, guidance on this question, please.
Okay. I try and make it a point of always answering questions directly when I'm asked, even if the answer isn't the greatest. So I don't want to get crossways with anyone in the Minnesota area about carp management. But nowhere else that we work are people as concerned about carp as in the Twin Cities. And maybe that means that you guys are further ahead of the curve. Most areas of the country just accept that the carp are part of the environment that they're managing. And they see management of carp as kind of an uphill battle. And so they just add the alum with the carp there. And if it doesn't last quite as long, then that's just the nature of the lake. So my perspective might be a little bit different than what some of the researchers are promoting here. And I'm not arguing with them. It's just different. I kind of view the carp as, even if you want to manage them, certainly getting them out is a good thing. There's no doubt about that. But would I wait on an alum application till they were all gone? No, it's kind of like watershed load. You're not going to get rid of all your watershed load before you do an alum application. You try and reduce it the best you can, and that's probably the same approach I would take with the carp.
Thank you, John. Thanks for
Yep.
taking the time with us. Okay, next item on our agenda is our Water Resource Management Plan, 60-day review approval. We're finally reaching an important milestone. Diane?
Yes. Mr. Chair and managers, we are requesting that the Board of Managers approves moving the draft of the Water Resources Management Plan, the 2019 to 2029 plan, to start the 60-day review period. Per Minnesota Statutes 103B.231 subdivision 7, once the draft is approved, the district will send out the plan for a 60-day review period beginning to Scott County, Metropolitan Council, state review agencies, Board of Soil and Water Resources, SWCD, towns and statutory cities within the district. So this is required again by statute. Once we receive the comments back from all these different agencies, we need to respond to each and every one of them. And then what we will do at the meeting that we have tentatively scheduled for March 31st is to review the responses to those comments and get those back to the agencies for their review. Once we have submitted those comments back to the agencies, then we can set up a public hearing. So this is, again, this is a process that's required by statute. There are two different timelines. One's a 60-day review and then a 90-day. So the 90-day review will happen once we have responded to the agency comments, have had the public hearing, and then it moves on again, ultimately for the Board of Water and Soil Resources review and hopefully approval in probably around June.
Great, thanks, Diane. Bruce, I see you're ready to go. Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to make the point here is we are not approving the plan tonight. We are approving the draft plan to go out for review.
That's correct. You would be approving the draft plan to go out for comment.
Okay.
Anything further? Any other questions? Then I would entertain a motion. Nope. I would then entertain a motion to approve our draft.
A motion to approve the draft Water Resources Management Plan to move forward for the 60-day review.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion, a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chair, just for the people listening and the residents, this document will be on our website? Is on our website?
Yes, Mr. Chair, managers, it is on the website.
It is a voluminous document if people are interested in spending the next 30 days looking at it.
If you're having trouble sleeping at night, there's good stuff in there. I kid. So the next item on the agenda is the board officer and liaison appointments. Kurt, I think you're going to introduce this for us, please.
Yeah, Mr. President, I make a motion, a two-part motion. The officers for the year 2020 for the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District, Mr. Mike Meiser as president, Kurt Hennis as vice president, Bruce Loney as secretary, and Charlie Howley as treasurer. The second part of my motion are the liaison appointments with the following changes. Charlie Howley to take over the Lower Minnesota Watershed, Bruce Loney to take over the Scott WMO, and the City of Savage will be covered by Administrator Lynch on an as-needed basis. I don't think I'm missing any others there, am I?
Just that we're going to strike the road.
Oh, yeah, we're going to strike Road Construction Advisory Committee and the Intergovernmental Work Group, previous liaison appointments. And so I'd like to make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and second. I'm just going to, because of the amount, no further conversation, anybody? Seeing none then, all those in favor say aye.
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 That motion carries 4-0. Thank you, gentlemen. So the next item on the agenda is a consent agenda, and typically this is reserved for the non-controversial items that we sort of prove en masse unless one of my colleagues or Diane pulls something off the consent agenda. So I'm going to ask my colleagues if there are any items they would like removed from the consent agenda. Bruce?
I would like to pull 5.1 meeting minutes for correction there. And let's see,
Claims list.
our claims list, 5.2.
Very good. Anybody else? Then I would entertain a motion to approve our amended consent agenda with those two items removed.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 4-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Go ahead, Bruce.
Oh,
I
on
know you're
the,
writing a task. so-
sure. On the workshop meeting minutes, it says that I was absent. I was just a little late. I did show up for that meeting, so make that correction. That was the only correction on the minutes, the workshop minutes. And on the claims list,
You did show.
we have quite a bit of money being spent for cart management to WSB. I'd like to have an explanation of what actually was been done for the amount of money that's being spent. So ask Maggie for that.
Mr. Chair, Manager Loney, so there's two invoices for WSB on this latest claims list. One is for $23,000 roughly. That one is actually the October bill. So WSB kind of gives us their invoices a little bit later. It takes them a little while for processing. And that one included, if you recall, we brought the ferric chloride barrier back to the board, and then we decided to go back and do like a regular sort of packet for the quotes, or the request for quotes. And so that, a bulk of that is the engineering to do that. And then the other part of it is we were finishing up those survey work on those little pond connections to the lakes. So they were in there trying to do like the trap net surveys, trying to figure out if there's carp in there. So part of it was that too. And again, this is from back in October. And then the $33,000 one, that's a bit of an error because it included the unpaid invoice from October. So that should actually be $9,000, not $33,000. And I'll get you the exact numbers on that, or I can give it to you now if you prefer.
That number should be different than.
Yeah, that was just an error on our part.
What's the difference between the
So
two?
the right number is $8,694.25.
9,000?
8,000.
8,000?
Yep.
Give me that number again. I have to write it down for minutes.
$8,694.25.
Okay.
I know you're taking notes. Anything further, Bruce?
No,
And-
yeah, something like that. So based on that, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for December 10th board meeting workshop as amended, and the claims list, I would make a motion, and maybe it should be separate
To
motion.
the amended. That's fine. I
Should we
think
do
they were
it
both amended
both amended?
as
And
discussed.
then
I think that's
the
fine.
amended claims list with the second WSB bill being $8,694.25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0, or 4-0. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda, we're up to the treasurer's report. And for that, our treasurer is not with us today, but there was one item that we wanted to report on. And that was the board, in a couple of meetings that we did have, we made a decision that we were going to prepay the remaining bond, the loan that we had out. And those two prepayments were going to be for roughly $170,000 early in 2020, and also make a prepayment of the 2021 bond payment of, again, about $170,000 here in February of this year. So prepaying both of those bond payments, which would net us an additional $10,000 in savings on interest payments, free that cash up. That idea, just because I always like to give him a shout out. Thank you, Bruce, for asking those questions and having us dig into this to find out that it was appropriate for us because we both had the cash available to make these payments. And so you saved us 10 grand, about $9,000, I think it was actually is what it netted out to be. But thank you, Bruce, for digging into that. So the next item on the agenda, then we're going to manager presentations. I actually have one tonight, so I'm going to kick this off unless somebody else has one. So one other item that the board had been discussing during 2012 is the fact that we would like to establish a certain award to recognize an individual. Actually, here's how we called it. We called it the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Clean Water Impact Award. The purpose that we decided on is the Clean Water Impact Award will recognize an individual, group, or organization that had a significant impact on improving or enhancing our public waters. For 2019, the board wanted to recognize Senator Eric Pratt as our inaugural award winner. And with the following that we wrote up on behalf of this, we presented Senator Pratt this award at the scale meeting last Friday. But here's what he did for us. So Senator Pratt, in 2019, we wanted to thank him and award his leadership in securing the legislation enabling a free market for the seining of invasive species such as common carp. His leadership in passing this legislation will enable the district to more easily and more cost-effectively rid its public lakes of invasive common carp, which have hampered the district's effort to get Upper Pryor and Spring Lake off the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's impaired water list for aquatic recreation. Improving the water quality on Spring and Upper Pryor will make these regionally important lakes safer for people today and in the future, as well as improve the recreational fishing and wildlife habitat. This new legislation will help watershed districts around the state improve their water quality as well. So it's not just an impact for our watershed, but across the state of Minnesota. So the Board of Managers of the Prior Lake Spring Lake watershed want to thank and recognize Senator Eric Pratt for his efforts and make him the first recipient of this award. So Senator Pratt, I know we said thank you already in public, giving you due recognition. Thank you, sir, for your time and effort to improve water quality in the state of Minnesota. That's all I had. Anybody else? Any manager report? Diane, you had something?
Mr. Chair and managers, I appreciate you approving the list of Citizens Advisory Committee members for 2020. We had invited the existing Citizens Advisory Committee members to reapply for a position on the CAC per state statute. And we have a number of folks that did not reapply for this position, and primarily I think it's because they just felt that they didn't have the time available to do the work that we've now requested of them. Under the chairmanship of our new chair over there, Christian Morkerberg, we have indicated there are about 5 different committees that we had invited prospective CAC members to sign up for. And those that were approved by the board did sign up to participate in a number of those different committees. But the members that are not coming back to the Citizens Advisory Committee are Roger Wall, Jim Wininger, Elizabeth Schramm, Joe Schramm, Larry Rundell, and Adam Fitzpatrick. So I'd like to thank them publicly for their years of service in helping us get to the place that we are today.
Great. Thank you, Diane, and thank you to those folks. Bruce, I see your mic is green. Did you have something for us?
Oh, no, not, I was just going to say, are you going to mention anything about our board retreat that we're having there?
Oh, I was. Thank you.
Okay,
Actually,
that's all
I did put this
I didn't
on.
see it on the list here, so that's why.
No, it wasn't on the list, but thank you. So about 3 years ago, the board decided that it was going to do a retreat to spend a little time to look at some of the bigger priorities, the focus and efficiency of the watershed, and spend some time by itself. We have been noticing these meetings and putting on what we were going to do. The board's found this effective, and I think it's been helpful, hopefully, to staff, not just creating more work for you, but the board will be having its 3rd annual retreat here this Saturday. It'll be at Prior Lake City Hall from 9 to 12. So thank you, Bruce, for that reminder. I had put this down, so wanted to let folks know. Oh, I actually had a thought that what I might do going forward is actually have some sort of a report, maybe to share with the public, some of the items and things that we have coming out of our board retreat. So thank you, Bruce, for that reminder. Anybody else? Seeing none, then we're on to the meeting and event schedule. For that, Diane, you want me to just read these, or? So we have 3 items. We have the Farmer-Led Council Lake Friendly Farmers Recognition on January 29th at noon at the Prior Lake VFW. We have the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting on January 30th at 6:30 in Prior Lake City Hall, for which I'm also going to say I think we're still looking for additional individuals who'd be interested in participating in the Citizens Advisory Committee. And then finally, we have the third item here is, again, the Farmer-Led Council, Growing Healthy Soils, February 26th from 9 to 3 p.m. at Ridges at Sand Creek. That sounds awesome. I wish I'm out of town. And I know it's during the week, but I would love to attend that. That sounds like a very useful thing, and I know the farmers have requested this. Maggie, I don't know if there's anything else you would share about that, because that's pretty unique opportunity, I believe.
Mr. Chair, managers, it's just a great opportunity for farmers, landowners, anybody who's interested to learn more about growing healthy soils. It's, building healthy soils with no-till and cover crops not only is good for clean water, it's also can be very good for profits. And so this is just building on that initiative by the Farmer-Led Council and just trying to get the word out there and get the experts in the door into our county. And we're working with our partners on this in Scott County, so it's a county-wide event, and we're just hoping for good participation.
Awesome. Thanks, Maggie. Is that open to the public? Fred asked, is it open to the public?
Mr. Chair, Manager Corrigan, yep, it's open to the public. We're specifically targeting Scott County farmers and landowners, but anyone is welcome to come.
Diane?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that this project is possible through a grant from the Board of Water and Soil Resources from the Clean Water Fund. So this was part of our watershed-based funding for the metro area that we received last year. So we're really excited about the opportunity to do that.
Great. Thanks, Diane. So seeing nothing else, I would entertain a motion. Wait, Bruce, you got something? Go for it.
Well, I know Manager Corrigan, this isn't your last meeting, is it? Okay, never mind. We'll get you next time.
Nice try.
Thank you. No, I would.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye, that motion carries. Thank you, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.